Hi, everyone. I'm Natasha. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cable. As you know, we automate the effectiveness testing of financial crime controls. And I'm joined today by Will Lawrence, who's the CEO and co-founder of Greenlight. Hey, Will.
Hey, Natasha, so excited to be here.
Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about first line of defense operations and how to automate them, which is obviously a space that Greenlight is in and is massively is having a big impact in. So to kick us off, can you just talk to us about what the first line of defense and the second line of defense, what they are, and I guess the differences between them?
Yeah, happy to. And again, super excited to be here and excited for the conversation. So, three lines of defense is this common governance model that we see in most financial institutions for managing risks. And it really breaks down to three different layers of people. They can have multiple different titles and they span across most of the financial institution. On the first line, we normally see fairly the front line, the people who are doing the day to day operations of the controls themselves. So these are the folks that are identifying the risks, seeing the risks, maybe working them a little bit, making sure that they get to a good spot. Within the first line, we often see this L1 and L2 structure. So the L1 are taking the very first line. If there's something that is suspicious and needs more scrutiny, perhaps gets up to the L2. Normally, it still sits in the first line, though, as it's fairly large operations. Behind the first line is the second line, first, second, third. The second line is really thinking about how do we make sure we have the most effective policies, programs, controls in place to start. These are folks who are defining and think about what do regulators want to see from our program? What are the type of controls we need to put in place? What are the technologies that we need? What are some of the emerging risks we see with our business? So I think these are people think about forward looking, how do we make sure that we're staying compliant and managing risk correctly? Behind that really sits these internal assurance teams focused on audit. And I know this is a spot that Cable is really, really fantastic at. Making sure that the first two lines are doing their roles and doing them effectively. Effectiveness is really the name of the game. So that's a framework we see across pretty much every financial institution. And I think it's just so much change is afoot across those three different layers.
Yeah. And do you see, so banks have to really comply with these three lines of defense. Do you see fintechs falling into this structure as well?
If you asked me this question in 2018, I don't think we would have seen that level of rigor at the fintech level. Now it's becoming non-optional. It is something that the fintechs that touch a lot of money movements have to really think about a lot. Gone are the days of abstracting away some of these functions to your banking as a service provider or embedded fintech provider. So the fintechs that we spend time with, who are take this very seriously, are investing heavily in how do we scale up the three lines of defense, and to the extent that they can, bringing those in house, making sure that they can actually do those operations, have the policy controls, and have audit to some extent under the purview of the chief compliance officer or the head of risk.
Yeah, that aligns exactly with a conversation that I had recently with Brian Brooks and Melissa Straight. Melissa is the Chief Compliance Officer at Coinbase, and she was saying that she is starting to see in the industry fintechs having a bank level compliance program, including those three lines of defense. Yeah, awesome.
100%. I think that's what we're seeing too.
Yeah. So that's what the three lines of defense are. Talk to me a little bit about the pain points in that first line of defense and those operations that happen within that first line of defense.
Yeah. For here, a little history, I always like to go down the memory lane a little bit. I used to work on the AML product team at Facebook, and Facebook has a lot of total payment volume going through the system. And I remember spending time with people, the analysts, that were in the first line of defense, and just understanding their workflows. What are the tools that they're using? What are some of the day-to-day steps that they're doing to complete their jobs? And if you ever sit by one of those people and watch it, it's kind of painful to watch. It's very, very manual. And I don't mean manual in like low value sense. It's very high value, important work. It's just painfully manual to do the work that is being done. It's a lot of document processing. I think of things in customer due diligence or IDV. It's reading documents to make sure that the owner or the business is who they say they are. It's Googling. Still, 2024, Google's a powerful use in the AML and financial crime world. So it's Googling. It's a lot of looking at spreadsheets and making pivot tables. Only that last mile is really analytical. After you've done this compilation of data and compiled it all into a nice format, can you start to make risk-based decisions? I think McKinsey actually estimated about 2/3 of the work of the average investigator is spent on admin or data collection type tasks. And really that 1/3 is where we're actually focused on analytical decision making. So it's really a painful thing. And what does this mean at the macro level? It means you can throw, let's just say 100 people at a process, and we're taking this 2/3 and 1/3 ratio, only 30% of their capacity is going to be spent on risk management or actual decision making. And we just wouldn't accept that from almost any other function. Imagine a sales team, like Tasha, you're a CEO. Imagine a sales team that's only spending 30% of their time like closing deals. That would be a terrible sales team. But unfortunately, because of this cost center mentality around risk and compliance, they're not given the tools or even the agency to build the things that they need to get out of those manual ruts. And if the biggest thing is manual problem, manual workflows, that's the biggest challenge. The second one is a lack of engineering support and product support and prioritization on these compliance and risk teams to solve some of those problems. So that's what we generally see. Manual tasks are really bogging down these teams, preventing them from hitting their output goals, also preventing them from actually mitigating risks.
Yeah, this is particularly acute, I think, in the PEP and sanctions space with screening. I remember being at Monzo and spending a weekend working through the backlog of PEP review tasks.
Oh no.
And it is just mind-numbing because you're just Googling, like you say, it's Googling a name, Googling where they live, trying to see if there are any hits. Very, very manual, repetitive work that doesn't require much skill. But as you say, that the bit that comes afterwards does. And how do you get rid of that first chunk of work, which I guess is where Greenlight comes in. So what has changed in the world of AI recently, and how does that affect compliance teams?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if you talk to anyone, I'm sure you see this all the time, Natasha. You talk to them like, oh, we're already using AI. We've been using AI for such a long time. We've been using AI for 15 years. And to some extent, it's true, right? AI is this big umbrella term. I'm fairly technology focused, so I was like, what is the underlying technology here? So before 2022, whenever someone was referring to AI, broadly speaking, they were looking at a form of supervised machine learning, which basically is a fancy way of saying crunching numbers that have like labels in them to try and make predictions. So a good example in our space of financial crime is transaction monitoring. Supervised machine learning systems would look at billions and billions of transactions, know which ones are going to be flagged as high risk or potentially worthy of a SAR or a UAR, and then escalate those ones anytime a new transaction comes in. So machine learning systems or supervised machine learning systems are very good at this number crunching and then prediction-based tasks. So when you've heard AI in like the 2010s, it was probably referring to that technology. The reason why AI is all the rage now is a new kind of kid has come on the block that has been able to unlock a new set of automations, and that is large language models. So when you go to ChatGPT and you talk to ChatGPT, you're not crunching numbers, you're not making a prediction, you're interacting with words. So language models are fantastic and are really good at word-based processing, which is a completely new set of skills. It's not numbers anymore, it's looking at words. And so that's what's really changed. And you think about what can we now automate that we couldn't automate 2 years ago, it's any workflow that's heavily word-based. And you might not think of, I don't think of your tasks in numbers or word-based, but most things that humans are doing every day right now is in the realm of words. Like Natasha mentioned the PEP at Monzo, you're Googling, you're reading, you're writing, you're copying, you're pasting, you're reasoning, you're comparing addresses. Those are all word-based tasks. And so that is why language models are going to be really primed to help out with a lot of automation in the compliance space, because so much of the workflows in our area are word-based processing. So TLDR here, yes, you probably have been using the AI before, but there's a new set of AI, a new underlying technology here that can allow you to automate more of the workflows that are probably bogging down your teams.
That's really interesting and a really very clear explanation of where machine learning or AI was just until very recently and how it has dramatically shifted in just a couple of years. How are you at Greenlight applying this to financial institutions? What is the step change then you're able to make in automating first line of defense operations?
Yeah, so Greenlight really focuses on automating L1 compliance operations with AI, or to be more precise, language models is what we're primarily using these days. And so what we do is like to spend time with those first line of defense teams. Like I mentioned, so risk management framework broadly, we spend a lot of time with anti-money laundering and financial crime teams, not necessarily like third-party risk management or other forms of risk. And we spend time with them and say, look at what their portfolio of work is. And we kind of zoom in on where it's taking you the most time and what percent of that work is language-based processing. It's a pretty rigid, 2x2 matrix there. And so what we've sequentially done has automating more and more workflows in that first line of defense that is language-based processing. The very first use case that we ever did was a name screening alert handling. So these are the PEP alerts that you're intimately familiar with, the sanctions, adverse media, and different forms of watch lists. Again, end-to-end, that is word-based processing. We've rolled that out and we've seen some incredible success on handling that. But that's not the only thing compliance analysts doing. Very few just stay on one single queue for their entirety because that would be quite painful. They shift over to things like customer due diligence. You review a new customer that starts to use the bank or the fintech that you're working with. You have to review their documentation. You might be looking at their website. You might be reviewing their financial statements. Those are the types of things that Greenlight's really strong at today. And another area that we're now more focused on is transaction monitoring alerts. Again, if you're handling, I always think if you handle 10,000 screening alerts a month, you're probably handling 100,000 transaction monitoring, just volume-wise, so much bigger for most organizations. So it's been really exciting to put a dent in that by helping them clear those alerts much more efficiently, or in some cases closing out the alerts so that we can just reduce the amount that humans need to review. The ones that are truly very low risk, you can go ahead and close this out. So that's how we're helping out teams. And the way we measure success here at Greenlight is human time saved. That's kind of our North Star goal here. How can we save more hours for teams and allow them to deploy those resources and people and time onto more complex investigations? I truly believe the reason we get all these consent orders saying ineffective AML controls is because we don't have people focused on real risks. We have people kind of peanut butter spread across the entire program, regardless of where the risk actually lies.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're right. There are two reasons why there are ineffective programs, and the results in these orders that mentions ineffective controls. And the first very much is people spending their time doing the wrong thing in the first line, that L1 work that you're trying to automate there. They shouldn't be spending 9 out of their 10-hour working days looking at PEP alerts that are false positives. They should be spending them all doing that higher value work of trying to figure out how the last 10% could be stopped from signing up, or how you could identify them earlier. And the other half of that puzzle, I think, is that the controls themselves are not tuned well enough to be able to be effective. And the teams of people in the second line or the third line of defense, they're spending their times dip sampling and trying to find where there are those ineffective processes and controls. And that's where Cable can come in and automate that review. So the people highly trained people, very well paid people who have been doing this for a long time, having to spend a huge amount of time working on something that is not a highly skilled area of work, so that they can find the few needles in the haystack where their skills are really useful. And I think both Greenlight on the first line side and Cable on the second line side are trying to get rid of all of that time spent on the stuff that doesn't require their skills, so that those people who are highly skilled, highly trained people can really spend all of their time on the work that they are best placed to do, that analytical, deep skilled work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I always, whenever we talk about what these investigators should be doing, I always think back to this one story that one of our early customers actually shared with us. He was doing AML at a great financial institution, and he described to us the most meaningful part of his, the most meaningful day essentially of his career was when he actually found a series of set of transactions that were going to a couple different dark web websites, a couple of different addresses that looked funky, and he had the time to pull the threads, and he was pulling the threads, and he actually discovered that it all connected back to a child pornography site, a child pornography ring, which was insane. He was able to file his SARS and get that site and that area kind of closed down or shuttered. And he just thought, wow, I really helped someone today. I really did something meaningful. And he still beams about that. And that was 10 years ago. And my thought at Greenlight is, how can we get more of those every day, every year? And I'm sure you guys think about Cable. How do we get more actual crime fighting, actual meaningful work by taking out the boring, by taking out the rote? And I think it's worth mentioning that not only just doing the job in the same way that a human would do, machines are really good at processing a lot of data. It can actually do it more effectively. So there's no trade-off. You might get efficiency here, but you'll also probably get quality improvements on the first line by introducing automation that has access to tools, access to data sets that humans just don't have the time to pull together.
Well, certainly reviewing, 5 hours worth of PEP alerts where most of them are false positives and you're just Googling, there is a high chance of human error, boredom and a distraction, whereas the machine won't have those problems. Yeah. So one of the questions that comes up about AI all the time, and especially in the financial institution space, is how can we use it in a safe way? And so I'm really interested in your thoughts of where can it and where can it not be used in banking? And not only from a safety point of view, but also, I suppose, from like a regulatory point of view, because we're not allowed to fully automate the SAR process. You have to have eyes on a case before you submit a SAR. So I'm really keen to hear your thoughts on, from a safety and a regulatory point of view, where can we use AI and where really should we not?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll actually start on the technology side here. Like, let's go back to this. People are looking at these AI strategies that are silver bullets that are solving every problem. That's are really, I don't think it's a good way to approach it. Again, what has changed in the last 2 years? It's language models have become useful. So first, let's just start and take off the tasks that require complex data analysis. Like, that is a lot of what we do in financial services, and that's probably still in the wheelhouse of the same technologies we've been using in the past there. So we narrow the aperture to everything that are these word-based and language-based processing things. So that's like step number one. And that actually takes out like 50% of the POCs that I see are kind of focused on maybe the wrong area. Reskinning of old technology into a new way is probably not going to get you the mileage that we're hoping to see with things like language models. So like starting on number one. When we look at number two, I always think about on the risk matrix, like what are the lowest risk things that can unlock a lot of efficiency? PEPs are a fantastic idea. The jury's still out on whether or not it makes sense to even monitor PEPs from a risk perspective. I think there's a conflicting perspectives in different geographies, think different things, but low risk alert evaluations are a great place to start. So starting off with low risk. As we go into higher risk items, to your point with things like SARS, it makes a lot of sense for it to be kind of this more of a co-pilot model here. One where AI is really fantastic at summarizing, aggregating, analyzing the data, and helping the human understand the story of what's going on so that they can make a higher quality decision faster with better documentation. So that's generally how we see it. And when we see that, and we know we have some of our clients have even shown what Greenlight is doing to their regulators, and they're seeing like, wow, this is a really useful research tool. And that is the right way to think about it for those more complex tools. So all that to say is like, first off, just toss things. I literally heard generative AI for transaction monitoring and I like shuddered. I'm like, that is a terrible, scary idea. Like, let's never do that. So let's take off those 50% of projects. Then let's zoom in on the lowest risk ones where we can unlock a lot of efficiency. And then when we go to the higher, more complex items, really focusing on how can AI take off the menial data analysis type work and allow analysts and humans to focus on the risk-based decisioning and actually clicking a file on the SAR after they've done all of the investigations that need to take place.
Yeah, interesting. All right. Thank you so much. It's been awesome to talk through this with you. I really appreciate it, and loving everything that you're doing at Greenlight. So keep it up.
Likewise, Natasha, we're huge fans here of Cable, so keep it up with what you're building.